Today we're going to talk about prevalent superstitious beliefs and how to get rid of them while we're still in the room today. So we're not going to have to wait to get rid of these superstitious beliefs. We're going to be able to just let them all fly right now. And a superstitious belief is any point of reference. So any point of reference anyone in this room has, any context, any frame of reference for anything that you have as a superstitious belief, no matter what it is. Because the reality of what we are has no point of reference. It has no point of reference, no frame of reference whatsoever. And when it comes to our own timeless freedom, which is awakened awareness, pure like infinite space, that space has no point of reference whatsoever. So when we, as that space, as that aware space, take ourselves to be any point of reference, any frame of reference within that space, we become lost in a superstitious belief. Whether our point of reference is being somebody, like being the physiology of the body and all of its other aspects. So that's a point of reference. That's a frame of reference. It's a convention. It's something that many people have adopted. Maybe there are many people in this room who have adopted that belief, that frame of reference. That is a superstitious belief. It's a belief that's commonly held, but it's a belief that has no basis. So now some of you may wonder, what is she talking about? We're all sitting here. We're all human beings. We have a physiology. We have all these other things that are going on. What does she mean that that has no basis? Well, when we use any word could be called a superstitious belief. If we believe that that word, or another name for a word is a label, if we believe that that word or that label is its definition that's listed in the dictionary, then we have a superstitious belief. If that's all we know about that word, then we hold a superstitious belief and we take ourselves to be a superstitious person. It's very simple and it's straightforward. This is the whole foundation or framework for dualistic perception. Taking ourselves to be a dictionary definition of something. But if we really want to look at any of these labels, we want to find out what they really describe. What do all these labels describe? What is their true underlying basis? For example, the human body, the personal identity. If the physiology of the human body isn't its underlying basis, well then what is? And if we find something about the underlying basis of the human body, does that apply across the board to all labels? So let's look at any of the labels. We'll take the personal identity, first of all, as a label. This personal identity, a body that is a physiology, and we'll look into that, and we'll try to find the underlying basis together. So we can take anybody. We'll take Paul here. He'll be our personal identity for the day. And we'll look into Paul's nature to see if we can find Paulness anywhere in Paul. Is there Paulness anywhere in Paul? Can we find any place in Paul that we can say is a location for a personal identity that was born, dwells there now, and it will at some point cease? So that's what we're going to be looking for. We're going to be looking for a personal identity that was born, dwells somewhere, and then at some point will cease. And so we'll look into every aspect of Paul. We'll take all of the major organs of his body and we'll just go through them definitively in a very scientific way, and we'll try to find Paulness in every one of them. Like, we'll look at Paul's skin. Well, can we find Paul anywhere in his skin? We'll search high and low. We'll go through every cell, all the cellular structures of the skin. Can we find Paulness anywhere there? No, we really can't. Well, we all know we can't find ourselves in our skin, probably. But what about the brain? A lot of us think we're in our brain. That what we are is in our brain. If our brain goes, then we go. And so we'll look into Paul's brain, and we'll see if we can find in any of the lobes of the brain, if we can find a personal identity called Paul. We look through all the lobes of the brain. We look at all the tissue of the brain. We look at the nerves and the nerve endings and the neurotransmitters and everything firing off within the brain. And we try to find this place where Paul was born, where he dwells and where he will cease. But we don't find it there either. And if we look all through Paul's body, no matter how far we break it down, we find that we can't find Paulness there. We could put Paul under an electron microscope, a huge electron microscope. We could bring in his mother and father and all his grandparents, all the people who know and love him. And we could say, what do you see under that electron microscope? And no one would say, that's Paul. No one would say that. And then we could take all the electrons and throw them in a linear accelerator somewhere and just smash them beyond anything knowable. And all we'd find is pure space. So what have we found out about Paul? The label of Paul, the underlying basis, is pure space. So this basic space that is Paul is also the basic space of all phenomena, the basic space of anything that can be labeled and described, as well as all the things that can't be labeled and described, is just that. It's basic space and nothing else. And now I'll tell you a little bit about my own personal saga of getting acquainted with basic space as the treasury of all phenomena. Basic space. Basic space could be called the peer view, and everything within it, in other words, everything that can be labeled and described as a point of view. But if we take up any of those points of view as a reference point or a context, then we've adopted a superstitious belief. We've adopted a superstitious belief about who we take ourselves to be, who we take others to be, and what we take the world to be. So within this basic space of phenomena, the basic space of all points of view, absolutely everything that appears within it is the dynamic energy of that space. In other words, it's inseparable from that space. Just like the color blue is inseparable from the sky. There's no way we could separate out the color blue from the sky. That would be absolutely impossible. So all the phenomena or points of view within this pure view of basic space are the dynamic energy of that space and nothing else. They're inseparable from it. So when we have a perception of any kind, a point of view, a reference point, all it is the dynamic energy of that space. When we identify ourselves as a someone who is viewing an object, then we have 2 points of reference going. We have 2 superstitious beliefs about what is going on. But when we just rest naturally as the essence of that space, when we allow the seeing of that space, as my friend Alan says, when we just allow seeing, allow awareness, then we realize that we've never been contained by any of these points of view, no matter what they are. And all of us know this. We know it unerringly. It's just that we've distracted ourselves with all the superstitions of conventional life, all the superstitions of the norm, of what most people are taking themselves to be. But we do not have to take ourselves to be anything other than what we are. And it's entirely up to us to get acquainted with ourselves as we are. So I'll tell you a little bit about my own experience with that. And when I share my experience, I want you very much to relate it to your own experience. So look back through your life and recognize the times when you were very aware of what you really are, no matter what anyone else was saying. Well, first of all, when I was a child, like all children, I just felt timelessly free. You know, there was nothing going on. People were trying to give me all these concepts, but all I wanted to do was play and look at the mountains, and that was my idea of a good time, and twirl around and just enjoy being, just enjoy the ease of being. Well, see, this is our natural state, enjoying the ease of being. But all of these concepts were introduced to me, all these frames of reference, these superstitions. Now, I had a choice as to whether I adopted those superstitions or not. And some of them I did adopt, although I never really bought it. And no one ever does. No one ever does really buy it. So, you know, when I got to be about 7 years old, I took myself to be Candace, and an I, and a me, and a mine, and I'd adopted all these personal identity reference points. And I knew a little bit about thinking and such things. I'd started going to school. And when I went to school, all I really wanted to do was sit out on the hillside and watch the whales swim by. I'd always get in trouble because the bell would ring and I'd be halfway down the hill watching whales. So I wasn't really fitting myself into any structure. I really had a hard time doing that. And this is true for all children. You know, it's true for all children. It's very difficult for us to associate ourselves with anything other than what we are. And I lived in Bermuda, and along the back side of our property there was a bay forest and a cedar forest. And I went to a Catholic school, Mount St. Agnes Academy. And there, you know, I learned that to be a good Catholic, and I learned that all the clerics, or the people who said the Mass, were priests, and that I'd never be able to say the Mass because I wasn't a priest. So I thought, well, you know, that doesn't really matter. I can say Mass anyway. I'll just go out in the woods here behind the house, and I'll make an altar. So I made this big altar of twigs and sticks and all of these other things, and cedar needles and bay leaves. It was very fragrant, a very, very beautiful place. So I put all these things together, and I set up my own little church in the wood, and then I started to say my own version of the Mass. Well, while I was doing this, all of a sudden, it was like everything disappeared. You know, there was just space. That's all there was. And I was so astounded. It was just like, wow, this is all there is. This is all there is. There's never been anything going on here. And then, you know, I thought, oh, I'll tell Mommy and Daddy about this. But then I thought, no, I don't think I will. I don't think this. I mean, after all, they had just told me there was no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny. How is this going to fly? That not only is there no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny, there's nothing. There's nothing going on. Not only to those points of reference. You know, when they told me these things, I was devastated. I was sitting in my little sandbox playing. My mother came out and sat on one of the little seats and told me there was no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny. Oh, oy vey, you know, that was just very difficult. So I knew this basic space wasn't going to go over, where everything just became indivisible. And so, you know, I kept it to myself, and I wandered on through life. And then when I was in 7th grade, we were given an assignment, and, you know, I kind of forgot about basic space and indivisibility and that kind of thing. When I was in 7th grade, we were given an assignment in our science class, and our assignment was we were to write about why everything is moving. So we all came back to the class, and the answer was that the Earth rotates. So that was why everything was moving. But that wasn't the answer I came up with. The answer I came up with was that everything is made of molecules, and molecules are always moving. So that's why everything is moving. But really, these molecules, they aren't anything. They're just space. And that this idea of the moving and the space in which the moving occurs, that basic space, that they're not two. So the moving and the non-moving are not two. So then, I had that realization. And my teacher really liked that. He said, okay, you're really smart. We're going to put you in a gifted program. And he said, now, one of the things about being gifted is that means you have to help people. So he said, you're going to be a spelling tutor now. So you see, I was learning all these things. I was learning that there is this basic space, and that when you're in touch with it, you know more about things. And then I also learned from my teacher that meant that compassion was part of that benefit for the whole was part of that. So these were just little things I was learning along the way. These were all intellectual. They were understandings, insights, or speculations. I didn't have the full evidence of myself as that. I just had a pointer. I had a pointer of a reality that was beyond anything that could be described. Then when I was in my 20s, I had another amazing experience of that, where I had more of a sense of it being myself. And that was when I had an emergency appendectomy. I had an emergency appendectomy, and I was under general anesthesia. But when I was under the general anesthesia, I was aware the entire time. And I wasn't aware as my body. I was aware as the space in which the body and everything else was going on. And I could hear everything going on. I could see everything going on. But I couldn't do anything about it. So I couldn't intervene. I couldn't say, hey, I know what's going on. I can hear everything you're saying. And what they were saying was amazing. They were telling jokes and just acting like they were baking a cake. They were very nonchalant about my body and cutting it open. So, then I realized that this space is aware. This basic space, it's aware. It's not a void or anything like that. So you see, these are direct human experiences. And if you look back on your life, every single one of you will remember these things about your own life. It's just that no one ever talks about them, so we don't become acquainted with them. We don't become acquainted with the reality that we are vast like infinite space, that our awareness is vast like infinite space, and that our body actually is dependent on that rather than awareness being dependent on a body. Do you see what I'm saying? So when we break Paul down to pure space, what we find is that there is no one there who was born, dwells, or will cease. That the reality of what Paulness is basic space and nothing else. Basic space and nothing else. And that anything that appears within that space is as that space is. And as that space is, it is beyond time and space, and it is beyond cause and effect. It includes cause and effect in time and space, but it's beyond cause and effect in time and space. Because when we examine cause and effect or time and space to find the causeness or the effectness or the timeness or the spaceness in any of those things, we find the same thing that we found out about Paul, basic space and nothing else. No phenomena, no matter what it is, no point of view, no matter what it is, has an independent origin other than basic space. So any label, no matter what it is, has an independent origin other than basic space. And the only way that we can come into touch with that as who we are is to simply allow the ease of that, to allow the ease of the awareness that is the underlying basis of that space.